Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. Some holidays are difficult for us because they're times that we used to be with loved ones who are no longer here, times that we may have used to turn to alcohol or drugs to help us cope with the stress of being around family. And now that we're sober, we don't have that, and we have to use other tools to cope with that stress. Some holidays, however, can be difficult because they were holidays where we used to get as wasted or high as we possibly could. And I think for a lot of us, Halloween falls in that category, which is why this topic came to mind today. We all have to be prepared to handle these particular events, whether it's Halloween, another holiday, a birthday, or any particular day in the year where we used to have the goal of get as messed up as possible and party as much as possible. And the question in recovery becomes, what am I going to do with my day? So there's a lot of different options that anybody has, and I just wanted to talk about some of the things that I do on these days. The first is mentally prepare for the day and have an idea of how I'm going to spend it. So for example, for this particular Halloween, I know for a fact that I am going to get some really good exercise this morning, which is going to help kind of get me in a good headspace in general for the day. And then I've got some plans to get my family with other families around the neighborhood this afternoon and this evening for trick-or-treating. And and then I've got some things to do in between. So I've got things to do to keep me busy. That's one of the important things. On these holidays, I've found it very important to be not so busy that I'm stressed out by any means, but just to have a decent amount of stuff to do rather than putting myself in a position where I'm just sitting around the house. The second thing that's important for me is to look at what I'm going to do and think about how grateful I am that I'm doing it without the burden of drugs or alcohol on my back. The idea of taking my son out trick-or-treating and going out and being social with other people, that's the kind of thing that used to be very stressful to me, because I would have to figure out, okay, how am I going to get as messed up as I can beforehand without crossing that line where people can really tell, or I start to do something inappropriate. And I'd spend all day fighting the urge to start drinking earlier than I really should. And it was a very stressful situation. In my recovery, I get to go and be there and be in the moment, and I will be there, and I won't be thinking about, oh, I wish I wasn't doing this, or I wish I was back home just knocking back more beers, or I wish I was doing something different. I actually will be able to be there and enjoy watching my son and his friends doing this really cool thing with neighbors who care about us and who we care about. And that's really awesome, and it's something that I couldn't have had were I still using, were I still in my active addiction. So I've got to look at those places that I'm grateful for, where I'm experiencing something in recovery that I couldn't have had in addiction, and then practice a little bit of gratitude around that. And then the last thing that I do is I also practice a little gratitude around what tomorrow looks like. Tomorrow I will wake up happy and feeling good because, one, I exercised today, and I typically feel pretty good the day after exercise. And two, because I've had a good, wholesome social evening with friends and people I care about and my family. And because I'll be able to wake up that way, I will likely feel pretty good tomorrow morning. 4 or 5 years ago, when I woke up after Halloween Day, that's not the way I felt. I typically would feel regretful over something that had happened, usually very hungover, and it would be the start of a miserable day. And at what benefit to me? Usually the night before was spent doing things that I really, when it comes down to it, didn't want to do. I was getting more inebriated than I really wanted to, and often could barely remember what had happened. And now I don't have that, and it's so much better to be in a position where I can wake up and move on with life and not get caught up in the things that happened yesterday that I didn't really want to happen. And that's the freedom that I get in recovery. That's the freedom that I get from experiencing a day like Halloween without any alcohol, without any drugs. So those are the three keys for me. Sure there's lots of other things to consider, but the big ones are, have kind of, if you're approaching a day that you usually overindulged or really centered that day around drugs or alcohol, have an idea what you're going to do that day and have some plans with other people. Practice some gratitude about why those plans are going to look different and the experience is going to be different now that you're sober. And then also practice a little bit gratitude about what the next day is going to look like compared to what the day after usually looked like when you were in your addiction. For me, those things really help me deal with some of the more common feelings that might come up when you're approaching a holiday or any other day that's usually centered around drinking, drugging, and other things that you're trying to avoid in recovery. That's it for today. Hope you have a good, safe Halloween. I'll be back here tomorrow with more.